Let's take a minute and talk about date-specific tools. Now, in the Add Column tab of the query editor, if you've selected a field with a timestamp or a date value, you'll see some of these date and time options. Now, for the most part, these tools are very easy to use, very user-friendly, but there are some interesting ones. For instance, age automatically calculates the difference between the date in each row and the current time based on the today or now function. Another interesting one, date only. If you have fields that include a timestamp and you really just want daily level data, that date only function will essentially just strip the time component out of that column. Then you've got your basic ones like year, month, quarter, week, and day, and these all work in a very similar, straightforward way. They just extract individual components from a date field, and then, in our case at least, put them onto their own columns. And if you are working with a field that does have time-specific data, those time component options would include hour, minute, second, instead of year, month, day. And then last, you've got some interesting tools here. Earliest and latest. These work just like the statistics functions that we talked about in the last lecture, where they're only accessible from the transform menu because instead of creating values for a new column, they transform a column down to a single value. And in this case, as you might expect, the earliest function will just return the earliest date in the column. The latest will return the last or latest date. So helpful for exploring a data set, not so helpful for actually transforming it. Quick note here, you will almost always want to perform these operations from the Add Column menu to build out new fields. Otherwise, it doesn't generally make as much sense to pull in a daily level column and then just overwrite that with month or quarter or year. So that's what we're going to do here. Quick pro tip, we're going to load up a table containing just a single date column and then use these date tools to build out an entire calendar table in just a matter of minutes. So quick sneak peek at what that actually is going to look like. We're going to start with a basic one column table just like this, one row per date. We're going to use these predefined date options from the Add Column menu and quickly build out a calendar table that looks something like this. So let's jump into Excel and give this a shot. All right, great. So if you've been following along, you should be in your Food Mart data model workbook, and you should see 3 workbook queries. At this point in the project, we've got customer lookups, we've got a store lookup, and we've got a product lookup. And now we're going to add a 4th table from another CSV, and you guessed it, we're going to open up the calendar lookup table. So here's that one column table that we were looking at. Go ahead and edit that table to enter the query editor. Let's see, the table looks good, calendar underscore lookup. That'll work. Obviously, we just got the one column here. And let's start with the transform options that we talked about just to see how they work. So these 2 features here, earliest and latest, they are not available in the Add Column menu, but they are in transform. And earliest simply returns the first date in the column. So January 1st, 1997. Go ahead and X out of that step. And let's just see what the latest date is. December 31st, 1998. So we've got 2 full years of data that we're working with here from 1997 through 1998. So X out again. And now let's go ahead to our Add Columns tab. Let's actually build out this calendar. I'm going to go kind of just right in order here, starting with year. Here you go. It builds out a new column containing only the year component of the date. It should have 2 values, 97, 98. Looks good. Now we got to reselect that date field, go back into our options. Now let's pull in month. You can see month defaults to a month number, should be 1 through 12. Looks good. Now I'd also like the name of the month. That's an option as well. So you can do start date, end date, the number of days in the month. I'd like the name, pretty straightforward stuff. Now let's go into the quarter options. I'll pull in quarter of the year. This should be a 1 through 4. Looks good. Back to date. Now the week ones are where they get a little bit interesting. You can do the week number of the year, the week number of the month, the start date of the week, or the end date of the week. In this case, I'm going to just enter the start date of the week. And one interesting thing to note here is that Power Query defines a week as starting on a Sunday. And there's no really obvious place to change that. There's no menu or submenu or tool in here where we can plug in a different start date. But if you know how to adjust this piece of M code, it's actually quite easy. And I know I told you we weren't going to be touching M in this course. I lied. I'm going to touch it just a tiny bit because it's a really helpful little tip. So all we're going to do is select right after the end bracket where it says start of week date. And we're going to add a comma and then type day dot Monday. And what this will do, it will change the definition of a week to starting on a Monday instead of Sunday. Now, this could be any day. So if you have a crazy week that like starts on a Wednesday or a Thursday or something, you could plug that in here too. But for the sake of an example, let's use Monday here. And when I press enter, watch these dates shift by one day. There you go. So now my start of week is defined as Monday through Sunday as opposed to Sunday through Saturday. So day.Monday, quick little tip there, just adding an additional argument to that date.startofweek function in the M code itself. And now let's just go ahead and wrap things up with a couple more. I want some day level things here. So let's do the day number, should be 1 through 31. That looks good. And then last but not least, let's do the day name as a text column. So there you have it. We've transformed this one daily level column into a whole calendar table, and we can now filter and segment, slice and dice our data by any of these fields. So this looks good. Keep in mind, nothing's set in stone at this point. If we did want to come back and remove some of these fields or modify them or add new ones, we can always come back and edit this query. And we can also add calculated columns elsewhere as well. So I think this is a great starting point. We can always tweak if we need to. So go to my options, close and load to, connection, add to data model, and load. So 2 years of data, 730 rows. It all checks out. Let's pop into our data model. Boom, calendar lookup right there. And we are good to go. So there you go, simple date tools in the query editor.